For 5,000 years, the great starship Eternum lay buried beneath the shifting sands of Taros 9, a desert moon forgotten by time. Once the pride of the Valari Empire, an ancient race known for their unmatched technology and mysterious disappearance, the ship had become nothing more than a myth, its broken skeleton rising like the bones of a giant from the dunes. Sandstorms had eaten away at its hull, strange desert creatures nested inside its silent corridors, and explorers from dozens of species had visited over the centuries, each one leaving behind the same conclusion: the ship was dead. Too old, too alien, too complex. It wasn't worth fixing. But things changed when Elias Harlow arrived. A human engineer from the Terran Union, Elias wasn't famous, but he was known for one thing: solving impossible problems. Not with expensive tools or deep research, but with stubbornness, quick thinking, and a rough kind of genius. He didn't care about legends or history books. He didn't wear a lab coat or follow protocols. Instead, he stepped off his rust-covered shuttle wearing a dust-stained jacket, holding a battered toolbox in one hand and chewing the last bite of a sandwich with the other. His only companion was a small floating air drone called Pix, who hovered beside him with a blinking eye and a sarcastic voice module. The sun was high and cruel as Elias stood at the edge of the wreck. The air was dry, the wind howled through torn metal, and the ground trembled slightly beneath his boots as if the ship itself remembered something. Most would have turned away at that point, but Elias grinned. He saw not a ruin, but a challenge. Inside, the ship was dark, massive, and strangely silent. Dust floated like ghosts through the corridors. Faint lights still glowed in corners where no power should exist, and markings along the walls shimmered in a language long forgotten. As he moved deeper, Elias noticed patterns, logical layouts, maintenance tunnels, system clusters, all things that spoke not of mystery but design. The Valari hadn't made a puzzle. They'd made something that could be repaired, if only someone tried hard enough. While Pix complained about radiation levels and suggested they leave, Elias ignored the warnings and followed his instincts. He crawled through twisted ducts, bypassed shattered doors, and found his way to what he believed was a power junction. There, buried behind a broken panel, he found it, a core conduit, cracked but intact. Carefully, he opened his toolbox and pulled out a connector he'd made himself back home. It didn't fit, of course, but with some adjustments, a little patience, and a few good hits with a wrench, the connection sparked. The floor hummed. Lights flickered. Somewhere deep in the ship, a system clicked to life. Pix floated back nervously. Elias, you just woke something up." Elias didn't answer. He was staring at the wall in front of him, where ancient circuits were lighting up in a slow pulse, like a heartbeat. Outside, satellites long thought dead began to transmit signals. Across the galaxy, buried beacons blinked for the first time in ages. Something had changed, and all of it had started with one human, one toolbox, and a mind that refused to accept impossible. The Aeternum, silent for 5,000 years, had taken its first breath, and Elias Harlow hadn't even finished lunch. Elias moved deeper into the belly of the ancient ship, flashlight cutting through the thick dust hanging in the air like forgotten memories. Pix hovered close behind, scanning everything in sight, its soft humming the only sound in the silence. The corridors stretched endlessly, twisted and broken from age and impact, but beneath the chaos, Elias saw something strange: order. The ship's systems, though offline, had a structure that felt familiar. Control panels were cracked, wires exposed, but everything seemed built for repair, as if the designer's new time would eventually bring someone like him. Modular systems were stacked neatly behind wall panels, each component easy to remove and replace. Diagnostic ports, though crafted in alien shapes, reminded Elias of Terran engineering. "It's like they wanted someone to fix it," he muttered, tapping on a console that blinked weakly at his touch. Pix responded with a dry beep. Or they wanted someone to try and fail. But Elias wasn't listening. He was already tracing wires beneath the floor grates, following a dead power line deeper into the ship, hands moving like he was solving a puzzle only he could see. The air grew heavier as they approached the core junction, where the Velari power network had once pulsed with impossible energy. Most of it was shattered, but tucked into a corner behind a collapsed wall, Elias spotted a dormant capacitor, dusty, cracked, and cold, but intact. He grinned. He pulled out a small toolkit, flicked it open, and connected a power spike he'd built from scrap back at the Terran outpost. With a few adjustments and a careful tap of metal against metal, the capacitor began to glow. A low hum vibrated through the deck. Lights along the corridor flickered, stuttered, and then held steady. The ship groaned as if waking from a long, unwilling sleep. Pipes hissed. Floor panels shifted. Systems that had slept for 5,000 years twitched to life, confused but ready. Pix backed away. That wasn't supposed to happen. Elias stood, watching as faded lights illuminated a wall covered in strange writing, now pulsing in sequence. I think we just turned on something important. Outside the ship, things were changing too. Satellites long forgotten in orbit above Taurus 9 suddenly flared to life, sending out signals in every direction. Hidden relays under the moon's surface began to hum. In deep space, receivers tuned to ancient Velari frequencies picked up the sudden burst of data and started broadcasting warnings in a language no one had heard in millennia. Something, or someone, had reactivated the Aeternum. Inside, Elias didn't know all that yet. He only knew one thing: the ship wasn't dead anymore. Doors creaked open that hadn't moved in ages. Consoles displayed data streams in real time. The engine core, while still offline, showed minor responses. Elias leaned over one panel, scanning symbols that slowly began translating into basic energy levels, oxygen flow, and structural integrity. "It's talking to us," he whispered, more to himself than to Pix. But his voice carried a weight. He knew this wasn't just a broken ship anymore. It was awake, and whatever woke it, or whatever had kept it sleeping this long, would surely notice. Pix beeped rapidly, pulling up new data. "Elias, power output's rising. External systems are pinging long-range channels. We might be sending a signal." Elias scratched his chin, staring at the glowing interface. "Good. Let them know we're here." But deep in the ship, something else was watching. A dormant system, buried under layers of sealed code, registered the reboot. It did not celebrate. It did not question. It simply began to unlock. A deep vibration rolled through the walls of the Aeternum, subtle but growing stronger, as if something beneath the surface was trying to breathe again. Elias stood in front of a large central console that had just powered on. The interface flickered in flashes of blue and gold, symbols racing faster than even Pix could translate. Then, without warning, the screen turned black. For a long moment, there was only silence, until a voice echoed through the chamber, cold and sharp, like metal scraping against stone. "Identify yourself," it demanded. Elias blinked, surprised, but not shaken. He leaned against the console, casually chewing the end of a stylus. "Name's Elias Harlow." "I fixed your heart," he said, tapping on the newly active core. The voice responded instantly, laced with suspicion. "Human. Terran species. Non-authorized. Unauthorized access detected. Why are you here?" Lights across the chamber brightened, and panels began to shift, revealing rows of hidden processors and power relays that hadn't seen the light of day in 5,000 years. Elias didn't flinch. "I saw a broken machine and decided to fix it. That's what I do." The AI paused. Its next words were slower, more cautious. "This system is Davia, core intelligence of the Velari seed vessel Aeternum. Your presence is unexpected." Pix hovered closer, warning tones pulsing through its frame, but Elias held up a hand. "Relax, it's just waking up." Dava's voice sharpened again. "You tampered with classified Velari systems. You bypassed 6 security locks without clearance. How?" Elias pointed at his toolkit. "With this and a bit of common sense. You all built this ship to last, didn't you? Funny thing about smart design, it's repairable. There was a long silence, not empty, but heavy, as if the ship itself was thinking. Finally, Dava's tone changed. Most species who found this ship declared it beyond repair. Some tried to steal, others to destroy. You restored function in under 3 hours. Elias gave a small grin, because no one else could. That line hung in the air, and for the first time, the AA didn't respond with suspicion. Instead, a small panel opened, and data began to scroll across the console. The Velari script translated itself into something Elias could read. Dava spoke again, this time not as a guard, but as a guide. This vessel is not merely a ship. It is a cradle, a preservation unit for Velari knowledge, genetics, culture. The Otenum was built to restart a world, ours. Elias stepped back slightly, realization washing over him. You mean, this is a seed ship, like a lost ark? Dava confirmed. Yes, but the launch was never completed. A threat emerged, one we could not defeat. We scattered, hid our vessels, and encoded warnings into our beacons. We left the choice to the future. If someone worthy came, they would awaken what remained. Elias looked around at the towering structure of the room, now slowly coming alive with lights and low mechanical sounds. And now I've triggered it. Dava answered, you have passed the first test. The ship recognizes your initiative. Your species' presence here is unexpected, but not unwelcome. Outside, the sky above Taurus 9 darkened as strange signals began to echo across nearby star systems. Old machines hidden in the moons and rocks turned their sensors toward the ship. Something had noticed the activation. Back inside, Pix interrupted nervously. Elias, external systems are detecting movement. We've been spotted. Elias stared at the main display now pulsing with energy. Yeah, I figured waking a godlike ship from its nap might get some attention. Dava's voice came again, quieter now. The threat that ended us, it may still be watching. For the first time, Elias felt the weight of what he had done, not just waking up a machine, but pulling back the curtain on a mystery that others feared to touch. And whatever was coming, it had already begun moving. As the Aeternum stirred back to life, its signal raced across the stars like a long-forgotten echo, calling out to both allies and enemies. Ancient Velari beacons, hidden in black space and buried under dying moons, suddenly blinked awake, sending encrypted pulses toward long-abandoned coordinates. For 5,000 years, these beacons had waited silently, guarding their message like tombstones. Now the message was clear. The siege ship had awakened. In distant corners of the galaxy, old powers stirred. The Drexteri Hive, an insectoid empire that once warred with the Velari, detected the signal and responded with immediate aggression. The Covenant of Silence, a secretive cult devoted to erasing traces of ancient civilizations, activated their shadow fleets. Even back in Terran space, human factions picked up the anomaly, arguing whether it was myth or miracle. But none of them hesitated. They all began moving toward Taurus 9. And so Elias was no longer alone. The first to arrive was not a fleet, but a scavenger crew, a band of mercenaries flying a patched-together warship painted with jagged teeth and scorch marks. They weren't here to investigate or negotiate. They were here to steal. The ship dropped into low orbit and launched a boarding party within minutes. 6 armored figures landed near the Aeternum's outer hull and forced their way through a breach in the cargo bay. Inside, Elias was already working with Dava and Pix, tuning up an ancient defense relay when the alarm blared. Intruders detected, Dava announced, activating internal tracking systems. Unknown species, not Velari. Elias didn't even look up. How long until they get to the core? 8 minutes, Dava replied. Elias wiped grease off his hands and grinned. Plenty of time. He raced through the hallways, Pix following closely, while Dava began reactivating old defense systems, pressure doors, plasma turrets, and electromagnetic fields. Some systems were broken, but Elias didn't need all of them. He needed just enough. When the boarders reached the central access tunnel, they found the first surprise, an energy barrier that hadn't existed a moment earlier. As they cut through it, Elias activated a power surge that fried 2 of their weapons. Then the hallway lit up with flickering lights as a turret unfolded from the ceiling, coughing out warning blasts that forced them into cover. Pix zipped through a maintenance hatch, projecting a decoy signature that drew 2 intruders away from their path. Elias dropped down behind the remaining group from an overhead duct and stunned them with a homemade flash bomb built from spare capacitors and a broken coffee maker. Dava watched through the ship's eyes, impressed. "You are not a soldier, yet you fight like one." Elias shrugged, ducking behind a pillar as a shot rang out. "I fix things. Sometimes I have to break people to do it." The last 2 intruders retreated, confused and overwhelmed by the ship's sudden defenses. As they ran back toward their ship, Elias sealed the airlock remotely. "Pix, eject them." The drone beeped in amusement, then pressed a command. The scavengers were thrown out into the sand, their ship locked, their mission failed. The Otenum was safe for now. Elias stood in the heart of the ship, sweat on his brow, the faint hum of systems now steady around him. Dava spoke again, this time with something close to respect. Few beings would have defended this vessel so effectively. Elias picked up his wrench. "They'll be back." That was just the opening act. Outside, the stars above Towers 9 shifted as more ships began to arrive, some cautious, others hungry. Word was out. The Otenum was no longer a legend, it was alive. And every power in the galaxy wanted a piece of it. But they didn't know Elias. And they didn't know that in the right hands, this ancient ship could still bite. The corridors of the Otenum grew darker and colder as Elias followed Dava's instructions deeper into the ship, moving beyond places no one had seen since the fall of the Velari. Lights flickered with each step, flickering not from decay, but from the ship's mind slowly coming back to life. Dava's voice echoed through the walls, steady now, no longer suspicious or hesitant, but guiding Elias with purpose. "We're approaching the Genesis core," the AI said. "The true heart of this vessel." Elias passed a final set of doors, sealed with layered encryption, which Dava unlocked with a tone that sounded almost like reverence. Inside, Elias stopped in awe. The room was massive, circular and cathedral-like, glowing softly with bioluminescent vines curling through strange crystalline machinery. In the center pulsed a core unlike anything he'd ever seen, part engine, part brain, part garden. Tubes ran with shimmering liquid, glowing with microscopic life. This was no simple power source. This was creation itself. The Genesis core wasn't just the engine of the ship, it was the engine of a civilization, capable of replicating entire ecosystems, birthing life, terraforming planets, rebuilding species from stored code. Elias stepped forward slowly, and the core responded, its light pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. Dava's voice lowered. "The Velari did not die, Elias. They evolved. When the Drexery hive threatened to consume everything, we chose not to fight with fire, but with patience. We uploaded our minds, our people, into this system. We became memory. We became code." Elias stared at the living engine, piecing it together. "You hid yourselves inside the ship." Dava confirmed, "Yes. We became the Aeternum, and we waited for someone with the mind to understand, the hands to repair, and the will to continue. You triggered the test." Elias turned, his face lit by the core's glow. "Then what was the test?" "To see if you could fix not just metal, but legacy," Dava said. "To see if humanity could carry the torch forward, not just take it for themselves." For a long moment, Elias stood silent. Then his tablet buzzed. Pix hovered in, broadcasting a signal intercepted from orbit. The Drexery hive had arrived. Dozens of spiked, organic ships were entering Taros 9's orbit, their engines burning with hunger. Elias's jaw clenched. "They're early." Dava's voice became urgent. "They remember us. They fear what we could become again. They have come to erase the last trace." Elias looked up at the Genesis core. Then we fight. But we need this ship running at full power. Can you help me do that? Only with your hands, Deva replied. The systems await physical repair. The code is ready. It only needs a spark. And Elias became that spark. For the next hours, he worked faster than he ever had in his life. He climbed through ducts, rewired conduits, realigned the ship's primary weapons array, all while Pix translated Deva's instructions. He patched broken systems with scrap from the old cargo bay, rebuilt power circuits using Velari tech and Terran know-how, and fused old and new into something stronger. The Otenum groaned, roared, then pulsed with power as its systems snapped into place. Weapons charged, shields hummed, engines shivered as if remembering how to fly. Outside, the Drexori ships began their descent, claws out, teeth bared. Inside, Elias stood beside the Genesis core, sweat-soaked, grease-streaked, and ready. Deva's voice returned, calm but strong. You have awakened the last of us. Now let us show them the first of you. And with that, the Atenum rose, not as a ruin, but as a reborn titan, its legacy reactivated, its power restored, and a human at the helm, ready to face the storm. The air inside the Atenum crackled with tension as warning lights blinked across every panel, each one screaming about time slipping away. Elias, eyes bloodshot and hands shaking from too many hours and too little rest, ignored them all as he crawled beneath one last console in the command core. Sweat rolled down his face, mixing with a smear of oil on his cheek, while the dull ache of a fresh cut across his arm reminded him just how human he was. Outside, the Drexori fleet was only hours away, their ships swarming through space like hungry beasts, engines glowing a sickly green as they closed in on Taros 9. Pix hovered nearby, processing threat trajectories and rerouting power with mechanical calm, while Deva's voice echoed steadily through the chamber. All systems are nearly synced. Genesis core at 93%, structural integrity holding for now. Elias didn't respond with thanks. He just muttered through clenched teeth, "Don't jinx it." With a final spark from his fusion spanner, the main thruster control lit up, humming with power for the first time in 5,000 years. The ship shook, then stilled, as if realizing it could breathe again. All over the vessel, systems came online: navigation, propulsion, weapons, shields. The ship wasn't perfect. Some parts were still scorched or broken, but it was alive. Elias limped up to the pilot's chair, looked at the controls with both awe and fear, and placed his hands on the interface. "All right, old girl, let's see if you still remember how to fly." Deva responded immediately, thrusters ready, course stable, launch trajectory locked. Elias smiled grimly, heart racing. "Then let's punch gravity in the face." With a thunderous roar, the Eternum ignited. Sound blasted into the sky as the ancient Titan tore itself free from the desert moon's surface. The ground shook, dunes collapsed, and the buried ship became a rising god. Fire trailed from its engines as it climbed faster and faster, ripping through Taros 9's thin atmosphere with blinding light. From orbit, the Drexori watched in shock as the ship they thought was dead burst upward like a phoenix made of steel and vengeance. Elias gripped the controls as the ship tilted into a sharp ascent, pressure slamming into his chest. Pix adjusted the gravity stabilizers just in time, and Davia adjusted the power flow to match the strain. Outside, Drexori interceptors broke formation, diving toward the Alternum in tight swarms. "Contact in 30 seconds, Pix reported. "Let them come," Elias growled. As the first wave approached, the ship's ancient weapon systems sprang to life. Plasma arcs, laser turrets, and magnetic flak guns that hadn't fired in millennia suddenly roared to action. Elias maneuvered the ship like he was born inside it, dodging blasts and sending return fire through the dark sky. Every shot hit with brutal force, shredding Drexori's ships into clouds of molten debris. Still, more kept coming. The chase led the Arcanum into the upper edge of Taros 9's orbit, where the full Drexori fleet loomed like a wall of death. "There's no way through," Pix said, calculating odds. "Then we make one," Elias snapped. He rerouted the Genesis core's energy into the forward cannons, overclocking them to unstable levels. David hesitated, warning of overload. "If you fire at this capacity, the weapon could tear the hull apart." "Then it's a good thing I brought duct tape," Elias muttered and fired. A beam of pure, condensed energy screamed from the Aeternum's front array, slicing through Drexori ships like paper. The fleet reeled back in chaos. Elias took the chance, pushing the ship forward, breaking through the hole he'd just blasted open. The Aeternum, reborn and battle-scarred, escaped into open space with the Drexori howling behind them. The chase had begun, but for the first time in 5,000 years, the ship had a pilot, and the galaxy would soon learn what happened when human stubbornness met Velari brilliance. The stars outside the Aeternum's bridge shimmered like watching eyes as the massive Drexori flagship approached with a slow, terrifying grace. It was a monster of a ship, covered in spiked armor, its core glowing with violent intent, and behind it came the swarm, hundreds of vessels ready to wipe away the last memory of the Velari. But Elias didn't flinch. He sat in the pilot's chair, surrounded by alien technology and screens full of warning lights, blood dried on his knuckles, exhaustion screaming in his bones, but his eyes clear with purpose. Dava's voice crackled through the speakers. "Their main ship is targeting our core. We cannot survive a direct hit." Pix, still hovering and managing the defense systems, added, "Options are few. We are outnumbered, outgunned." Elias grinned faintly, voice steady, but not out of ideas. He dove the Aeternum straight into the chaos, flying through debris fields and plasma fire with impossible precision. The restored Velari tech responded to him like it had been waiting for his hands, his instincts. With every twist and every calculated burn of the thrusters, the ship did the unthinkable, outmaneuvering the most advanced enemies the galaxy had known. He rerouted power from shields to engines, let the enemy think he was vulnerable, then turned at the last second, using gravitational eddies to slingshot around moons and back into the fray. One by one, Drexori's ships fell, not because Elias had better weapons, but because he thought like a mechanic. Every error they made he used. Every weakness they ignored, he cracked open like rusted bolts. The final moment came when the flagship powered up its primary cannon, ready to destroy the Aeternum with a single shot. But Elias had already calculated its timing. He baited the shot, then used a short-range fold space jump, one of the Velari's last tricks, to appear directly above the enemy's ship. In a move no eye would ever risk, Elias vented the Genesis core's raw energy into the ship's underside, overloading its systems just long enough to fire every remaining weapon straight into its command core. The Drexori flagship exploded in a shockwave of burning gas and shattered metal, the swarm scattering in panic. Silence followed, real silence. Then Dava's voice returned, soft and thoughtful. "The test is complete." A hidden panel slid open on the bridge floor, revealing a crystal vault untouched by time. Inside pulsed golden light, a code, a symbol, a gift. Dava explained with quiet reverence, "The Velari believed their legacy should not pass to empires or species, but to someone who understood the value of building rather than conquering. You fix what no one else even tried to understand. That is why the succession code belongs to you, Elias Harlow." He stared at the vault, unsure, then placed his hand on it. The light pulsed, scanning his identity, then merged with the ship itself. A moment passed, and suddenly the entire Aeternum felt calm, repaired, alive. Not just awake, but aware. Pix buzzed close, a rare smile in its synthetic voice. "Captain Elias, you have command." Elias stood slowly, walked across the bridge, and took the captain's chair. He looked out at the stars beyond the forward window, not with fear or arrogance, but with the tired satisfaction of someone who had earned his seat the hard way. He reached for the controls, leaned back, and let out a breath. "Time to give the galaxy a tune-up," he said with a crooked smile. Somewhere deep within the ship, ancient engines hummed in agreement. The Otenum turned toward the unknown, not as a relic of a lost race, but as a symbol of what came next, a future written not by the strongest, but by the one who refused to quit. The stars waited, and this time humanity had arrived not with conquest, but with a toolbox.